It's funny how you think, someone like really know them until you don't for 8 years. It was just me and my wife. Of course, there was my son from a previous relationship, but he was just a kid, innocent and unaffected by adult issues. Our life wasn't extraordinary. We were just two people in their early 30s leading a seemingly normal existence. She worked at a construction company. I always thought it was cool. A woman in a hard hat, managing big projects. She had a certain charm about her, something that drew people in, even her boss. Apparently our home was a rented place, but it felt like ours. It was comfortable and familiar. We had a routine. She would come home from work, we'd have dinner, discuss our day, maybe watch some TV and head off to bed. Life was simple, but then it all started to change like a warm summer day, suddenly overrun with dark clouds. My wife began coming home late from work, always blaming it on the pressure of new construction projects. It didn't sit right with me, but I chose to believe her. Why wouldn't I? And then there were the clothes. She never cared much for fancy labels, always opting for comfort over style. But suddenly she was coming home with bags from upscale boutiques that wasn't like her. Not at all. But I shrugged it off thinking she wanted a change. People change. And my wife was no exception. The real kicker came with the credit card statements. We had always been cautious about our spending, never going overboard. But now there were charges for things. We didn't need clothes for men and women, extravagant restaurant bills and hotel charges. It was baffling, and deep down, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I wanted to confront her, ask her outright what was going on. But I feared the answer. I feared that the woman I loved, the woman I married, wasn't the person I thought she was. That's when I knew I had to do something. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my son too. His future, his stability. It all hung in the balance. So that's how it all started. My seemingly perfect life unraveled bit by a string of strange behaviors and unexpected credit card bills. But what came next? Well, I wasn't prepared for that. Not at all. You know how they say trust is like a mirror. Once broken, you can put it back together. But the cracks will always show as the days rolled by. The cracks were beginning to form in my trust for her. First, there were these small things that didn't add up. Her phone would buzz late into the night, and when I asked, she would casually dismiss it as work. I wanted to believe her, but something didn't quite line up. Then there were these unfamiliar items I found in our house, men's accessories, a watch, a tie cuff links. They were not mine, and she shrugged it off as gifts for a company raffle. It was such an odd explanation that it festered doubt in my mind. Then there was a smell, the unfamiliar scent that wasn't mine or hers. It clung to her clothes when she came home late from work, a unique blend of cologne and something else. Something I couldn't quite play, but it was distinct. I asked her about it and she brushed it off, saying it was probably from a client or coworker. But the smell kept returning, a potent reminder of my growing suspicions. I felt like I was living in a constant state of unease, a perpetual what if. The person I had known and loved for 8 years was now acting suspicious and acting like a stranger to me. Hiding behind half-truths and inconsistencies. I was torn between wanting to believe her and confronting the harsh reality that was unfolding in front of me in quiet moments when she was not around. I'd find myself replaying our happy memories, questioning if they were as genuine as I'd believed. That's the worst part of doubt. You see, it makes you question everything, even the good times. And through all this, I had to put up a brave face for my son, a cheerful facade that masked the turmoil within. He was innocent in all this, and I wanted to protect him, shield him from the storm that was gathering. It's one thing to deal with heartbreak as an adult. But how do you explain that to an 8-year-old? It was clear that I needed answers, not just for me, but for my son too. I needed to know what was happening, what had happened to us. I didn't want to keep thinking and wondering. So I decided to hire a private investigator. I just didn't have time to follow her. I had some money saved up for this crucial expense. There's a certain trepidation you feel when you're on the verge of confirming a suspicion. You know, that feeling in your gut. That's what I felt today. I hired the private investigator. Finding a private investigator isn't like what you see in the movies. It's a mundane process filled with formalities and legalities. There was a local firm with good reviews. So I went with him, sitting in their office explaining my situation. It felt so surreal. I was effectively inviting a stranger into my life, asking him to delve into the most intimate details. The first few days were tense. There were constant updates, none of which were conclusive. My heart would leap into my throat every time my phone rang, and with every mundane update, it felt like a tiny victory. A little more time in my blissful ignorance. But life had to go on. I had my job, my son had his school, and my wife. Well, she seemed as normal as ever. The late nights continued, the shopping sprees persisted, and the unusual credit card statements kept coming. It was like we were stuck in this strange limbo, waiting for something to give throughout all this. There was a question that gnawed at me. Was I doing the right thing? Was it fair to spy on her, to have her followed? But then, was it fair to live in a state of constant doubt, to have my trust shattered day by day? There was a question I grappled with every single day. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It gnaws at your conscience. It messes with your mind. And so the days turned into weeks, each passing moment filled with a dread of the inevitable. Until one day the call came, the call that confirmed my worst fears. The call that shattered my world as I knew it. The investigator started by saying, "I have some news." His voice was steady, businesslike, but beneath it, there was a hint of sympathy. That's when I knew what he was about to say wouldn't be easy, as he began to detail the evidence he gathered. My world started spinning there. It was the truth I'd been dreading, unfolding in front of me. The late-night meetings, the secret rendezvous at hotels, the intimate dinners, all with her boss. The reality hit me so hard, knocking the wind out of me. But the betrayal didn't end there. The investigator found out through an acquaintance that my wife was stealing money from our company. She had been funneling funds to a secret account. It was a revelation that left me shocked, astounding, and utterly heartbroken. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a complete betrayal of trust, a disregard for everything we have built together in that moment. I felt a range of emotions. I couldn't quite put into words: anger, despair, betrayal, even a strange sense of relief that I finally knew the truth. But more than anything, there was a profound sadness, a mournful realization that the woman I had loved, trusted, and shared her life with was a stranger. I looked at the walls of our home, the memoirs we created, and they all seemed tainted, spoiled by her actions. Every picture, every memento, every shared laughter. It all felt like a cruel joke. But amid the heartache and betrayal, there was a resolution. I had the truth, and now I had to act on it. There was no going back, no pretending it never happened. I had to confront the situation, not for myself but for my son. He deserved a future free of lies and deceit, and so, armed with the evidence, the hurt, and the resolve to do what's right, I took the next step. I hired an attorney ready to navigate the murky waters of divorce. But that's a whole different story. A tale of its own. As I walked into the attorney's office that day, my heart was heavy. My mind was buzzing, and my soul was drenched in a mixture of anger, despair, and betrayal. You know, I never imagined I would end up here discussing divorce proceedings and asset divisions. But here I was, and there was no turning back. I handed over the evidence, the photographs, the financial records, the investigator's report. As the attorney flipped through them, I saw his eyes widen in disbelief. I couldn't blame him. It wasn't every day you came across a case of marital infidelity coupled with the rumor that my wife was stealing money from her employer. Over the next hour we discussed the legalities. What I remember most about that conversation was not the legal jargon or the procedural intricacies, but the attorney's word of reassurance. "You're doing the right thing." He said, his eyes sympathetic. There was a flurry of paperwork, signatures and notarization amid the chaos. There was an odd sense of finality, like I was closing a painful chapter of my life, ready to embark on a new uncertain journey. Fast forward, and the anxiety and anticipation became my constant companions as I waited for the court proceedings to begin. Every ring of the phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Every mail delivery, a moment of apprehension. It wasn't easy, and it was far from over. But I knew I was on a path to getting my life back for me and my son. That's the thing about standing up for yourself. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time, and at that moment, that's exactly what I felt, a terrifying sense of liberation. The kind that changes your life forever. There's something dramatic about serving divorce papers. At least that's what the movies show us in reality. It's clinical, detached, devoid of any emotion, and that's exactly how it went down. She was at work when the process server showed up, divorce papers in hand. A coworker later told me about it, how she had turned white as a sheet, eyes wide in shock. I wasn't there to see it, but I can imagine it, could picture the disbelief. The realization sinking in the house was eerily quiet. When I got home that day, she hadn't come back from work, and part of me was glad for it. I needed time to process, to collect my thoughts. This was at the point of no return. And I had crossed it. Our lives had been intertwined for 8 years, and now we were entangling them strand by strand. We only had 2 significant assets to our names. Our cars. She had hers. I had mine. The house was rented, so no messy battles over property in some ways. We were lucky as far as divorces go, but it didn't make it any less painful as I sat in our empty house. It dawned on me how much life was about to change. There would be no more shared dinners. No more cozy, movie nights, no more morning kisses. Our love had turned into legal documents. Our marriage into court proceedings. It was heartbreaking. That's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't discriminate. It comes uninvited, settles in, and demands to be felt. I still remember her face as she walked in, pale lips pressed into a thin line, eyes devoid of their usual sparkle. It was like we were 2 strangers under the same roof. In that moment, I realized that we needed to talk, not as a couple on the brink of divorce, but as 2 individuals who had shared a life together. We owed it to each other to have that conversation, to lay it all out in the open. So we sat down in the living room we had decorated together, surrounded by memories of our happier times. And then I confronted her about the affair, about the rumor of the embezzlement, about the lies and deceit. It was a painful conversation filled with accusations, denials, and eventually confessions. She admitted to the affair, but she did not admit to stealing from her company. It didn't really matter to me if she admitted to the affair or not. I had proof she was cheating. I just wanted to see if she would. She tried to justify it, to explain it. But no explanation could mend the trust that was broken. As she confessed, I felt a multitude of emotions: anger, yes, betrayal. Of course. Now it was time to move on, to pick up the pieces and start fresh. Following that painful confession, things moved pretty quickly. Our case was expedited considering the circumstances. And before we knew it, we were standing in front of a judge finalizing our divorce. The solemnity of the space, the weight of the decisions being made. It makes everything so real as we stood there answering the judge's questions, going over the terms of our divorce. It felt like we were spectators in our own lives. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. Given our situation, we had no property to divide, no custody battles fight. It was just a matter of formalities of signing documents and making it official. And within an hour it was done. Our 8 years of marriage reduced to a stack of papers. Our vows dissolved by the stroke of a pen. It was as if a chapter of my life had been closed, sealed never to be opened again. But along with that, there was a sense of freedom. I was ready to move on, ready to rebuild my life for my sake and for my sons, but as it turns out, the universe had other plans. My story was far from over. An unexpected turn was waiting just around the corner. Just when I thought I was seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, life threw a curveball. It wasn't unexpected per se, but it was a shock. Nonetheless. You see, after the divorce was finalized, my ex-wife's company hired a forensic accountant in the weeks that followed. The truth came tumbling out: the financial records, the illicit transfers, the secret account, all of it pointed towards my ex-wife. The company discovered that she was a culprit behind the missing funds, to the tune of $70,000. It was a hard fact to digest, yet another layer of deceit to unravel with the evidence laid bare. The company had no choice but to press charges. Embezzlement is a serious crime and they were not about to let it slide. I received the news through an old coworker of hers. The news shook me, but there was an odd sense of poetic justice in it all. It was a whirlwind of events. After that, her arrest, the media frenzy, the court proceedings. It was like watching a soap opera unfold. Only this was real life and it was happening to me. Despite the chaos, the drama, I found myself feeling grateful for the truth. Grateful for the closure, grateful for the chance to start over. It was a bitter end to a turbulent chapter, but it was an end nonetheless. And sometimes that's all you need to begin again. As of this writing, my ex-wife's sentencing is pending. The court proceedings are ongoing and every day brings with it a new revelation, a new headline. She's tried to call me a few times from jail, but I haven't taken any of her calls. It's not out of spite or anger, but out of a need to move on, to put this chapter behind me. Our story ended the moment the truth came out, and there's no going back from that. As I navigate this new reality, I'm learning to focus on the positive. I have an amazing son who's been my rock through all this. I've learned who my true friends are. The ones who stood by me through the storm. It's been a roller coaster, no doubt, hopeful for a future, untainted by lies, hopeful for new beginnings and hopeful for the healing that lies ahead. So as I finish off my story, I do so with a heavy heart, but a clear conscience. The past may be tainting, but the future is a blank slate. After all, life is about moving forward